The Lottery, Bloody Billion. Chapter 6. The Red Streets. The city woke up wearing someone else's face and didn't bother to take it off. By mid-morning, the west warehouses were light wounds, and the south tunnels had learned to whisper Rook's name back at him like the first half of a curse. Above ground, the billboards had switched to a new palette. Crime scene gold and good news teal, promising clarified proof standards, while a ticker shook loose numbers like teeth. The money wasn't just in the air. It had built small houses in people's heads and was renting them month to month at triple the rate. Rook came up from the ribs with Dane and Little Ty, the three of them moving at that speed that says aware, not hunted. Bridges threw long shadows like the hour was shy. A lottery van idled at an intersection it didn't deserve, bright decals pretending to be a conscience. A man in a suit stood near it, juggling 2 coffees as if caffeine could make morality easier to swallow. Dane rolled his neck until the pops lined up like relays. "You hear it?" he asked, meaning the tremble in the blocks, the low-grade chant under the sirens. Rook did. The chant wasn't words, it was tempo. The streets had slipped a gear, doors with peepholes were cracked open, not to check for cops, but to breathe in the rumor that $1 million centimeters from your knuckles can make you into something with a capital letter. Blunts glowed in doorways like lighthouses for the wrong ships. Coke framed new holidays under every streetlight. The self-appointed hunters had switched from camouflage to advertising. Bright shells with sponsor patches, shiny plate carriers, brand new boots that still squeaked because vanity outruns intelligence. "We get small," Rook said. "We listen." They let the crowd carry them 3 blocks east to where a pop-up bar had colonized a loading dock with plywood and fairy lights. The marquee said, "Last call is proof o'clock" in bubble letters that made Rook want to throttle whoever owned a marker. Inside, men in mirrors rehearsed bravery. Women in thrifted dresses rehearsed disbelief. Everyone rehearsed an alibi. At the rail, a bartender with a tattoo of a saint smoking a cigarette poured shots like forgiveness. "Winners drink free if they show their faces," he announced. 2 men laughed too hard at that, because jokes were paper thin, and everyone wanted to be on the correct side of them. Ty, small and wired, scanned the room the way he had learned. Floors first, then exit hinges, then the reflection in the bottles. He tugged Rook's sleeve. "Camera birds," he whispered. 2. Ceiling corners. He pointed with a chin and no finger, one black eye above the neon beer sign, another over the DJ shelf. Sponsored, not police. Proof-hungry, not protective. Dane knocked his shoulder to the beat of a Knox track resurrected for profit. "They'll stream you walking," he said. "They'll stream you breathing." Rook's face, the DMV scowl that had become a brand he never asked for, still flickered on the bodega TVs and in the corner of sponsored feeds. In here, though, he was just a tall man with a bad coat. He let the bar's volume pull attention forward. He chewed the city's hum the way he chewed cheap bread, steady, focused, not mistaking chewing for eating. Outside, a procession of small gods rolled past, a scooter with a media flag zip-tied on, a pickup with 2 men standing in the bed, slogans down their sleeves, a bicyclist with a GoPro on his helmet and a rosary around his wrist, whispering that he was here to do good work. A kid no older than Ty walked backwards, filming a cousin who'd decided he was the kind of person this day was invented for. "Buy us too," Rook said, "because even soldiers need water sometimes." Dane slid away and came back with plastic cups that tasted faintly of citrus and cleaning supplies. Ty sipped slow, eyes on the door like a cat reading weather. On the municipal screen at the end of the block, the host's smile tightened 0.5 millimeter. He put on his "we're sober now" eyes and said, "We want to remind the public that any mutilation or unnecessary desecration will result in disqualification of payout." The word desecration sat wrong in his mouth, like he'd borrowed it from a sermon and forgot the rest of the homily. "Translation," Dane said. "Make it pretty." "Camera neat," Rook said. "No mess on the logo." The screen split into a grid. 5 small rectangles, each the color of someone else's risk, showed streams from across the city. In one, the brow of a man Rook had seen in the glass yard, the church boy freelancer, paced under a streetlight, lips swollen and taped. In another, a pair of women in glossy boots stood on a stoop and unfurled a banner that read, "Mothers Against Mayhem," while their teenagers filmed them, bored and loving. In a third, police in soft armor drew a line with blue tape and peered down their noses at men whose lives were about to get shorter. The fourth tile snagged Rook's eye and snagged the city's along with it. A shaky camera in a walk-up apartment, kitchen light too bright, linoleum yelping under boots. Somebody's voice, breathy with coke and a mantra. We live, we live, we live. The stream title, number 3. That number wasn't a certainty, it was a proportion. But proportion is close enough to truth when your hands know they've got nothing better. Rook felt the flood begin. The bar tilted toward the screen as if it had gravity. The bartender turned the music down and the volume up, an economy of switches that made him complicit. A kid perched on a speaker threw both hands in the air like the film was already famous. On screen, the camera lurched through a narrow hall and into a living room that had tried to be nice once. Potted plant dead, couch tired, curtains still insisting on a floral pattern bought in optimism. 5 people in the frame. 2 hunters with gym muscles, a third with a shaved head and a ring in his brow. A woman who might have been the apartment's owner or a neighbor who smelled trouble and came anyway. And, at the center, backed up against the window, Winner 3. Rook didn't know her name yet. The lower third tried to give her one that made sense. Tasha V. Veronica T. Unverified. Survivor. But the clip's captions chased themselves and gave up. She was mid-30s, hair braided tight back from a face that had seen a lot more math than jewelry. She wore a hoodie with a team logo flaking from the shoulders and had one hand in the pocket for courage and the other raised, palm out, like this was a conversation instead of a countdown. "Turn the camera off," she said. "Say it with your mouths." A hunter grinned like he was trying on a face. "We gotta eat too." Shaved Head held a metal bat like a microphone, asked the universe a question it had already answered. "Proof is proof." "You ain't proved a thing," she said. "You broke into a place where I was making noodles." The bar went soundless. People who had been talking spoke with their eyes. In the corner, a man who had been an uncle once crossed himself loosely and then uncrossed because God on television never answers. Winner 3 moved before anyone else did. She used the window. She smashed it with her elbow, not to jump, but to make the room colder, to take the breath out of men who thought muscles wrote law. The shard rain came down, and the Batman flinched because that's biology. She sprinted into the space she'd just broken, and came out with a glass knife, cheap and bright, jagged like a last resort. Rook liked her hands. He liked the way they didn't tremble. He liked the way she didn't ask anyone for permission to use them. The stream's comments ran like a river with trash in it. "Put her down, Queen, run, 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 y'all lame, Link, LMAO, mute." The word mute pulsed because music from the bar next door had bled into the mic, and the stream's algorithm was punishing reality. Winner 3 slashed once, not at a throat, at the camera. She opened the lens like fruit. The screen shuddered. The image fractured and reintegrated with a smear of blood abstract enough to be art. Comments screamed emojis. The bartender made a sound he didn't mean to make. "Come on," Dane breathed. "Come on." Shaved Head regained his rhythm. The bat came up and came down, not on her, on the arm that held the knife. You could hear the crack over the stream's compression. You could hear the air leave the room and rush into the future where this scene would live on phones like devils. She staggered and didn't scream because some people save their voices for words. She drew the arm back to her belly, fingers fanned like pain was a bird trying to escape her. Her eyes went flat in the way victims' eyes go, not vacant, battle calm. The second hunter grabbed her by the hoodie and pushed her into the couch. The woman in the room, the neighbor or the owner or the sister, yelled, "Stop!" in the tone you use when you mean it and know you won't be believed. The camera angled to catch everybody. A voice off screen, the camera holders kept saying, "We live," like saying it would make the next 5 seconds acceptable. Winner 3 kicked the coffee table with her shin, and sent a pile of junk mail, an ashtray, and a remote sliding under the couch. The stream cam dipped to catch it as if the ashtray mattered. She used the dip to drive her forehead into the hunter's face. The nose broke. The commentary spiked. She rolled off the couch and toward the front door. The chain was on. She fumbled it left-handed and got it halfway before Shaved Head got there with the bat. In the bar, Dane had his bottleneck in his palm and was leaning forward so hard his spine might break. Ty had both fists on the counter, face hard and small. Rook didn't move. He watched for details, for the way Shaved Head's left shoe pushed too much on the inside edge, for the way Winner 3's breath stayed even, for the way the neighbor's hands shook like birds on a wire. The bat ended it. Not the way you'd expect. He didn't cave her skull. He pinned her hand to the wall with the barrel and used the bat like a lever to break fingers and hope. She lost the knife. The second hunter swept her legs with a kick that had been practiced on air for months in rooms that smelled like ego. She crumpled but did not curl. She kept her eyes up as if she wanted the camera to tell a specific story later. Shaved Head said, "Proof," again, like the word itself was a sacrament. He pulled a nylon roll from his pocket. Inside, zip ties, a scalpel, 3 little laminated cards printed with QR codes for proof submission, a roll of tags, and a small plastic bag with a rubber band around it. "Don't," the neighbor said. She said it to everyone. The camera guy said, "Straighten the shot." The hunt leaned forward. Rook felt his palm burn. He looked down and discovered he'd pressed it too hard to the bar's rail. He relaxed because hands carry orders to the world, and he didn't want to hand this one to anyone. Shaved Head looped a tie around Winner 3's wrists and cinched. She didn't fight that part. She looked at the camera and somehow at the person holding it and said, "Tell my sister I never liked that couch anyway." It was a joke you make when you know you've lost the punchline. The second hunter held her shoulder. Shaved Head set the bag and rubber band where he needed them. He picked up the scalpel and hesitated because the voice in his head, whether conscience or caution, wanted to say, later. The stream wanted him to say now. Money wanted him to say now. The little laminated cards wanted him to say now. He chose now. The camera flinched, even voyeurs blink. The blade did its quiet job like it had all the time in the world. It didn't. The neighbor screamed properly. The man whose nose she'd broken said, "Damn," like an applause joke, but his voice betrayed him. Winner 3 made a sound like stepping into cold water. The bag went where it needed to go. The rubber band snapped home. The camera refocused. The comments turned to soup. The word verified hovered on the edge of the stream like the officials were watching with their finger on the gold key. The bartender gagged and looked at his lemon wedge like it had done this. Dane covered his mouth with his hand and made a noise he'd claim later was a cough. Ty swallowed in a way you could hear. Rook let the screen hang in his eye without landing, a trick he'd taught himself in places where boys who wore uniforms pretended loss was a chess move. The little crew on screen moved like they were in a dream someone else was having. The neighbor tried to wrap the stump with a dish towel. Shaved Head angled the bag at the camera, showing the face clean. The other hunter held the head upright as if it might decide to talk. The camera guy said, "Closer," and the hand obeyed. Men love commands that let them deny authorship. 3, the lower third finally decided, "Winner, confirmed." A small gold ribbon pulsed in the corner like someone had won a raffle. The feed's comments blew past any human effort to read them. Mute, mute, mute. Jesus, link, hate, win. This is why, not real. She fight, respect, L. "Turn it off," the neighbor said again, now useless, now always. Shaved Head turned it higher. The door in the stream flung open. A man with a portable rig, lights like kitchen knives, mic like a weapon, stepped in, breathless. "Media partner," he announced. "Exclusive." He had a badge that wasn't a badge. He wore righteousness like a shirt 2 sizes too small. "Get out," the neighbor said, and the woman had never sounded more like a mother, and the man with the rig had never sounded more like a disease. The bar shoved itself away from the screen. You could feel people's minds looking for exits. The bartender turned the sound down, but not off. The DJ bled in a funeral track that wasn't Knox for once, something older, strings and cheap bass. The door let cold in. Rook tapped the rail twice to remind his heart it was a tool, not a tourist. He scanned the room. Some hunters had gotten quiet for the first time in a day. 2 men with plate carriers had their mouths open like they couldn't remember how to close them. A sponsored producer held her tablet to her chest as if it could protect her from what she had filmed. "Leaving," Dane said. It wasn't a question. "Leaving," Rook agreed. They slid out through bodies that didn't know where to go. Outside, a woman was selling gloves with grippy palms for safe handling, and a basket of breath mints because she understood the human impulse to pretend civility mattered. A drone traced the outline of the block like it was drawing a portrait. A priest with a collar stood on the curb and looked like he wished collars were swords. Ty's jaw was a miniature fortress. "They gonna bring it somewhere," he said, voice controlled, like a trophy. "The bar around the corner," Dane guessed, pointing with his chin at an awning with a neon martini trying to be a halo. Rook read the flow. 2 men running the block carrying a heavy bag like a gift they didn't deserve. A pickup with hazard lights and stickers that said public service in a font that belonged on smoothies. A knot of people following the bag the way people follow parades. He smelled copper without allowing himself to name it. No overused words, just chemistry. He adjusted his coat and walked. "Why?" Ty asked Small. "Because money has to be witnessed," Rook said. "Even by idiots." They reached the corner bar before the procession. Inside it was dim on purpose and humid with bad decisions. A laminated sign at the door read, "No proof on the bar." Someone had written LOL in Sharpie across the bottom. The bartender here wore gloves and the expression of a man who has decided to forgive some of the wrong people and who wouldn't survive forgiving the rest. A bookie hustled his board onto the back wall and rewrote odds with chalk that squeaked. Rook's name, center. A line through winner 2. A new line through winner 3, already being circled by fingers that had never heard the word compassionate without wanting to spit. "Here they come," someone yelled, as if telling the room to be on its best behavior. The bag cleared the door. The room inhaled. The 2 men walked like they were carrying a baby anger had birthed. The world was a sick movie shot by fans. Dane's upper lip curled. Ty went slightly behind Rook and put his fist into the back of Rook's coat like you do when the world startles, and you need to touch something that will not betray you. "Don't," Rook told Dane, because Dane's breathing had turned into a fight in his throat. Dane nodded, which didn't mean he agreed. He bit the inside of his cheek and made a small fist that fit his pocket like a weapon that had decided to sleep. The bag reached the bar. The bartender shook his head without moving his neck and pointed at a side table. "There," he said. Authority in the sentence and none of the power. The men changed course. They laid it on the table with a care that insulted care. Shaved Head followed, proud as a politician. The neighbor was not there. She was somewhere screaming in a kitchen that had been renamed by blood. The media partner came in last, grin back on, mic ready, no shame to his shadow. He said, "Community," like the word had only just been invented, and he wanted to be the first to use it in a sentence. Rook moved through the bar like a rumor with elbows. He wasn't going to stop the carnival. He didn't have the manpower or the weather. He had other math. He stood where the camera could see him on purpose, framed by neon and refusal. A long figure with a chain under his coat, and a blade he hadn't decided if he was going to love today. "Rook?" someone whispered, like they were asking if ghosts come in sizes. Shaved Head clocked him and did the small chin lift that men do when they want to be in a history book. "Come witness," he invited, magnanimous and false. "You, of all people." Rook didn't move closer. "You could have let her live," he said. Not loud, not soft. The sentence landed like a small stone skittering under a door. "Then what?" Shaved Head asked, delighted to have a debate. She kills me for my million? He tapped the bag. We don't get choice. The rules are the rules. The rules are a check, Rook said. You chose to cash it. A murmur moved through the bar like a rat deciding which pipe to climb. The petty kings with sponsor patches leaned in. The priest in the doorway watched and gave up on what his hands could do. The bookie rubbed his board clean and started rewriting in case this conversation found a kill that could be bet on. Shaved Head grinned, chipped tooth trying to play villain and succeeding. You gonna make me sorry on TV? He asked, gesturing to the camera that had the red light glowing the way a coal glows when it's biting its lip. Rook thought about Ledger's angled foot. He thought about the angel saying grape and meaning purple. He thought about the ex-cop's radial and the church boy's theology and the drone that little Ty had killed in his hands like a bird. He thought about $1 billion sitting behind 41 hours like a god with a grudge. No, Rook said. I'm gonna make you famous for being boring. The room laughed. It was a mean laugh, but it wasn't Shaved Head's. He faltered, a tick, because predators need applause to feel like stars. What? You killed a person in an apartment, Rook said. You packed a bag and brought it to a bar. You want me to give you poetry. You ain't earned syllables. The priest swallowed his shock. A woman near the jukebox snorted, then buried it in her sleeve. The bookie smirked, then shrugged, then smirked again because math doesn't get offended. Shaved Head lifted the bag slightly, impractical gesture, like he wanted the camera to see how light a human can become when you take out the argument. Proof, he said one more time, defiantly. Receipt, Rook corrected. But you forgot the part where you live with it. Living is later, Shaved Head said, and meant it, a man looking forward to his own sins aging into stories. Dane's hand flexed on the bottle and didn't rise. Ty pressed his fist harder into Rook's coat, and the pressure grounded the man more than any philosophy could. Rook stepped back just enough to give someone behind him an exit line they didn't deserve, but needed. 2 cops stepped into the bar then, faces blank and lined and tired from watching new versions of old crimes get brand new merchandise. They didn't pull weapons. They pulled their duty out of their pockets like a lighter. Everybody out, the first one said. We're processing. Processing. The bar exhaled. The audience boiled toward the door. The camera tried to swim upstream and got a shoulder in its lens for its impudence. The bookie hugged his board and swore he'd be back in 2 hours. The priest gave a blessing with his eyebrows and vanished because men who wear collars often have to save their breath for more likely miracles. Shaved Head tried to negotiate with the officers using words he'd learned from the host's lower third. Community. Clarification. Subsidiary rights. One cop raised a palm. The other pointed at the sign that said, "No proof on the bar." He made a joke nobody laughed at. Then he lifted the bag like it was lighter than conscience. He didn't make a face. He had practice. Rook took Dane and Ty by the sleeves and let the room empty them into the street. Outside, the air had learned a new bitterness, something like pennies left on a radiator. The crowd turned its attention to the van, to a graphic on the municipal screen that now read, "Submission verified," with a little animation of a gold seal being licked by light. Dane spat into the gutter, a small ceremony for the piece of his heart that wanted to burn the van down and dance on its blueprint. Move, Rook said, voice even. They'll turn this block into a photograph. Where? Ty asked, because he couldn't just run anymore. He needed a reason as an ounce of drug to make the sprint go down. A place with doors, Rook said, then a place with none. They cut through the drip line of the bridge where nighttime lives even at noon, and let the city's noise become background. Behind them, the bar got smaller, without getting farther away. Ahead, the underpass ribs waited to sing. The screen's gold blinked and blinked and blinked like someone had mistaken approval for absolution. Dane flicked a crumb of keef off his thumb and hitched his hoodie tighter. Red Streets, he said, naming the chapter without knowing he'd done it, because sometimes the world chooses its own titles. Rook nodded once. He didn't say the words out loud because words are promises, and he needed every one of his for later. They disappeared under the bridge again, where the world narrows and choices are easier to count. Above somewhere someone cheered because proof had been paid. Below, Rook lit a blunt to keep his hands obedient and drew smoke into lungs that had learned a lot of people's names and didn't plan to forget any of them. The sound changed before the light did. Sirens shed their polite uniforms and took up residence in throats. Stolen car horns leaning long, drone rotors drilling in sets of 4. Ambulance yowls pressed into loops by DJs who couldn't help but make tragedy rhyme. East, west, and the 40 blocks of nervous concrete between, the day shrugged into an outfit it thought looked good. Glossy blood, glossy money, glossy lies. Rook kept the bridge ribs to his left and let the river chill kiss his right ear. He rolled his shoulders until the ache in his forearm landed where it belonged, and not in the hand that held decisions. Dane walked like a man trying not to bless or curse anything. His tin clicked a small metronome in his pocket. Little Ty ghosted tight, head up, study face on. The kid was getting good at making his breaths look like he was older than rent. "North cut," Dane said. "Bookies switching to QR. They'll chase us with coupons." "Coupons buy time," Rook said. "We're shopping for air." They slid into a lane of afternoon that pretended to be evening. Clouds bruised, glass throwing back light like it owed someone interest. Every doorway had become a potential pulpit. A woman in a hoodie with sequins down the sleeves held a Bible and a blunt at the same time, and somehow meant both. A man with a loudspeaker asked if this was the end times, and a teenager answered yes, and then asked for his at. A pop-up table offered hand sanitizer labeled Proof Safe and a plastic tray of free mints. 2 kids in ski masks sold verification tags out of a shoebox like they'd been born into the gig economy. "Ty," Rook said. "Eyes." The kid tugged his cap and started counting screens, cameras, badges, shoes, everything that tells you who's going to be important in 90 seconds. 9 sponsor LEDs, he whispered. 2 chest cams, 1 body cam, 2 plainclothes with cop hair. Bookie corner, 3 deep. They didn't go toward any of it. Rook cut left twice and down once into a service lane behind the bar that had hosted the bag. Blood had made its own map there, smears like arrows, a shoe print shaped like a bad decision, ending at a hose still running over concrete, pink water in the gutter. The bartender, rubber gloves snapped, rinsed the table like he hated it and needed it in equal measure. "You ain't family," he said without looking, voice ground down gravel. "Neither are they," Rook said. A flicker down the block brought his head around. 2 men walking fast with a cooler between them, low like men carry a sofa. They weren't strong, they were correct. The cooler had a lottery office sticker on it and a laminated barcode taped crooked to the lid. That meant delivery. That meant someone had moved their proof into the chain and got told to finish the errand. The city had found a way to make couriers of killers, and Rook wondered if anybody in a suit understood what that would do to morning. Dane saw it too. "They're hustling specimens," he said, and the phrase made something hungry in him shut up. "Don't stop them," Rook said, "not because of mercy. Because of math." They let the cooler pass. The carriers didn't meet eyes. They stared at that middle distance where checks clear. Behind them limped a man with a microphone on a pole and a small light clipped to his collar. A child with a skateboard trailed at a safe 15 feet, filming with the broken camera from last night, making a new story out of a more expensive lie. Around the next corner the block widened, as if the street had taken a breath. Fire from a trash barrel licked paint off a metal sign. Someone had spray painted across the signs "No parking" in sloppy red, no proofing. It failed to convince anybody. Rook angled his chin at Dane's pocket. "Half," he said. Dane cut a careful rail on the back of a scratched phone case. "Worship small and private, like men make when they know a god doesn't deserve the hymn." Rook ghosted a sliver, enough to make the edges stand up and salute without marching in place. He passed. Ty shook his head a hard no because he was working with all the chemicals his body made on its own, and he didn't want to confuse them. The meat of the crowd swerved east on a rumor. "Live stream at the car wash," somebody hollered, and 3 scooters, 2 bikes, 4 pairs of bad boots, and a drone took off like that sentence was a GPS. Rook didn't chase. He let the wake clear. Then he walked into the car wash from the exit end so he'd see faces before faces saw him. It was theater. Of course it was. A team in bright vests, community-proof partners, had set up at the vacuum stalls. The hoses pulsed like snakes, chewing on wrappers, coins, any small thing. A woman in a blue bob wig read scripted safety guidelines into a camera, while a man in a satin jacket posed beside a plastic table with finger sandwiches and an ice bucket like Carnage needed catering. A cooler identical to the one Rook had just watched pass sat at the center like an altar. It was empty, prepped for a prayer. "Gross," Dane said, and the word sounded almost clean. "On me," a voice called, and even the drone looked. A new stream had hit a block away in a pawn shop. Red font screaming winner sighting and a GPS tag that probably lied but would be believed. The car wash emptied like a church discovering sport. The woman in the blue wig tried to keep talking. The satin man tried to keep smiling. They both wound up packing sandwiches into a tote like a weird reverse picnic. Rook stole water from a vending machine that would have fought him yesterday and didn't today. He tipped the bottle low into his mouth and savored cool. The bottle said spring in block letters. The water said municipal. Ty pointed with his chin at the far vacuum stall. A shape under the car wash's canvas roof made a small human cough. A hand, thin, tattooed with an infinity symbol that had been done in someone's kitchen, held a blunt like it was a lifeline, trembling. A face followed, peering, a woman in a mechanic's coverall, skin the color of cocoa with an oil sheen of sweat, eyes wide but not wild. She wasn't a winner. She was a human being who'd gotten trapped in a bad geography lesson. "You good?" Rook asked, non-invasive. She swallowed and took a drag that steadied her hands a degree. "I got sons," she said, "but I can't go home. They'll—" She didn't finish the sentence because some words don't deserve completion. "Go west," Rook said. 2 blocks. Look for a bakery with the bell that rings wrong. Go past, back door. Knock twice, then once, then wait. If a woman who looks tired opens, say you were sent to buy forgiveness. She'll know." The woman studied his face for a lie, found none she could afford, nodded once, and slid under the retaining chain like a snake that had decided rocks weren't worth the argument anymore. Dane watched her go. "You a travel agent now," he murmured. "I'm jealous of anyone who's got a destination," Rook said. They moved. The crowd tide carried them toward the pawn shop stream and away from it at the same time. Rook steered in the third direction, Barrio North, where the streets got tighter, the windows had more bars, and the day drank itself early. A boy with a pit bull grin sold blunts as mood stabilizers. A woman with a lavender wig sold baggies of coke as study aids. A man under a tarp sold knives he claimed were the legal kind, which meant he had no idea. At an intersection that had a broken light and the mood to match, a van with a magnet that said, "Hunt right now," rolled onto the crosswalk and died. Men piled out. Camera, producer, a docent in the Museum of Bad Television. The camera caught Rook's frame, tried to lock, couldn't, tried again. He moved on, slow enough to insult, fast enough to pass. "Rook," the docent called. "Can we get your thoughts on best practices?" Dane laughed and coughed and said without turning, "Practice not dying." That's when the city cracked open in a new place. A scream rang out that wasn't performance. Men snapped their heads like dogs when a front door opens. The sound had an address and it painted itself on sky. Rook didn't run to it. He stepped sideways to a gap between parked cars and watched the stampede right itself. It came from the barbershop a block over, the one with the mural of headphones that looked like an angel, and barber chairs that had seen more confessions than priests. The glass front burst, not outward, but inward. Somebody had thrown a body through it. The body got up, bleeding from the ear, laughed ugly because coke makes men think Impervious is a place you can buy a ticket to. He pointed too high at the ceiling and pulled a trigger on a gun designed by some sloppy metal worker trying to feed a family. The bullet kissed a light and ricocheted and put its mouth on the wrong person's shoulder. "Down!" somebody screamed, and the block tried to obey with all the dignity of a flock of pigeons. Rook didn't go down. He crouched and looked for the shooter's feet. They were planted bad. The knees argued with the ankles. The safety had a personality disorder. Dane tugged Ty back behind a mailbox because not all cover is equal. A crew of 3 in plate carriers took the shot as invitation. They surged with a chorus of "On your left" and "Police," even though their badges read SPON, SORED, and were printed this morning. The shooter laughed and sprayed the sidewalk. The plate boys moved like they'd watched videos. They tried to flank. They met a barber with a razor who had thoughts about men turning his shop into a game show. He carved one of them across the back of the hand and hissed, "My house," with the authority of someone who'd sewed up more ears than emergency rooms. The barber's cut didn't end the thing. It kicked the thing into a new room. The plate boy hit him in the chest with the flat of a baton, and the barber air-woofed and folded onto a chair like a student being told to pay attention. His apprentice, a kid with a cape still around his wrist, threw a can of barbicide, which is a beautiful word for a liquid that will do nothing for rage. It shattered and made blue perfume. People slipped on it and swore. Rook shifted left, got a better angle, and watched the man who mattered arrive. Ledger didn't walk in stage center. He drifted in 3 seconds after a drone, 2 seconds before a police tape spool, 1 second slow of whatever you think of when you imagine fate. He wore the same hoodie, the same chipped-tooth grin at half strength, the same ankle lies. His eyes tracked past Rook as if to say, "See? The city reads my parables." He didn't say anything. He flicked 2 fingers at the plate boys, and that was enough. They stopped cosplaying bravery and started getting out of the way. He gestured once at the barber, and the kid cut his own rage in half, sat down, looked like he'd been given homework. "Count to 10. Ledger murmured to nobody and everybody, then turned down the block toward where a rig was trying to berth itself into a better angle. Men obeyed because choreography pays better than improvisation when the room's on fire. Rook could have used the pause to leave. He used it to steal. He plucked a slim jack from an open toolbox, an L-shaped crank used to lift cars and pry windows your hands don't want to try. He weighed it in his palm. It answered with certainty. Dane saw the move and smiled like a brother. Ty's eyes said, "We keeping that?" Rook's nod said, "Maybe." The shooting stopped because bullets are expensive and attention more so. The crew and plate carriers found their humbleness again and froze like statues of men who had rethought God. The barber stood, grabbed his comb pick like a wand, and told a client, "Sit." I ain't finishing this fade in a jail cell, and then, incredibly, he did finish the fade. Hands steady, eyes steady, head equipment stable. Courage has small jobs it has to keep doing even when the big ones knock. Sirens did their last chorus and went hoarse. The tape spool found a place to wrap itself around something easier than humans. The drone moved on to the next block, where a new roomer had already set up a P.O. box. Ledger disappeared again, the crowd folded, and the street decided the barbershop riot should live as myth while it still had teeth. "Eat," Rook said, before the next sermon. Dane bought empanadas from a cart whose owner had learned to take cash without having an opinion. Ty got a grape soda that tasted like purple and medicine and home. Rook chewed meat and pastry and let calories counsel him. The river blew colder, like a disappointed teacher. "Ledger got a map nobody else has," Dane said around beef and salt. "Ledger's map is time," Rook said. "He's always late enough to look like a judge, early enough to pretend he didn't bring the gavel." Ty squinted at the sky like he could see the drone pattern the way birds see thermals. "He wants you on the bridge again," the kid said. "That's his picture." "He wants me where falling looks like math," Rook said. "We go where drowning looks like choice." They turned their backs on the warehouses and cut toward the old stadium, concrete ribs of a thing that used to matter, now rented for flea markets and church revivals. Today it hosted neither. Today it hosted a call and response between vendors selling blades with names and men with coke yelling those names back. The parking lot held a militia muster, dozens of hunters trying to form teams like pickup ball. A woman ran a whiteboard and wrote X's and O's and assigned alleys like routes. A guy in a hockey mask passed out pink wristbands that read "Actualized Killers," and everyone laughed because caskets cost money. Rook wanted no part of it. But the lot was a crossroads today. You passed through or you circled, and circling is for people with time. "Keep your face a rumor," Dane said. "You're a celebrity in 10 wrong mouths." Rook dipped his head and let the jack ride long down his sleeve, hand covering enough metal that it looked like a walking stick to the lazy. Ty tucked into his shadow. Dane adopted his sound guy posture, tin tucked like a field recorder, bottleneck pocketed like a mic. It almost worked. It always almost works. "Yo!" a voice called. Not that word they banned, a different one. A street hello with a blade inside it. Rook turned just enough. The voice belonged to somebody who looked like he'd been sent to borrow trouble and came back with a lease. Cheap armor, fresh tattoo still scabbing, a gold bar sprouting wings. He had a GoPro on his chest and a blunt in his teeth and the giddiness of men who think consequences are for Monday. "You the bridge ghost," he said, as if that were a title he'd invented. "Man of the hour, say into the cam how it feels to be hunted, like reading bank statements," Rook said. "Boring until it's not." The man laughed big for the lens and then made a small mistake, because men who love cameras always do. He reached to pat Rook's shoulder like he owned the angle. Rook stripped the hand, bent the finger past prayer, and didn't break it, because breaking invites escalation. The man whined and then tried to turn it into a laugh. The mic caught both. "We'll be seeing you," he puffed. "You're always seeing me," Rook said. "But your eyes are rented." The man squared up, pride negotiating with survival in his jaw hinge. Then Ledger's shadow took his pride by the back of the neck and walked it elsewhere. A text pinged across the man's screen, big font, red. "Move east, better shot." He obeyed like a dog. Some leashes are invisible. Rook exhaled quiet. They slipped the last 100 feet to the stadium's service tunnel and rode the curve east until the noise softened to a palatable wrong. Rook let them pause where a concrete pillar wore 1,000 tiny knife scars. He traced one with his thumb and imagined all the arguments those blades had failed to win. Dane was already rolling. The blunt came pretty this time, tight barrel, leaf whisper smooth. He sparked and passed. Rook pulled just enough smoke to let his nerves stop auditioning for panic. Ty held the blunt, looked at it like a test, and passed it back. He didn't want to learn the wrong comfort today. The municipal screen on the far side of the lot flashed a new split. Top left, hospital. Top right, church. Bottom left, police briefing. Bottom right, a feed from somewhere on the south side, the camera set at knee height, catching legs moving fast down a hall. "Looks like they got winner 4, Dane said, reflex before facts. The Chiron flirted with names and gave up, settling for winner, unconfirmed, and hashtags that made Rook want to chew glass. He didn't watch. He listened. He counted breaths in the tunnel and found 3 that didn't belong to his crew. He pointed. Dane turned the bottle in his hand sideways, ready to make a mouth confess. Ty flattened and got small and tall at the same time. Out of the utility closet 2 shapes slid. Angels again, head wraps, faces carved by months of triage. One held a plastic tote of casseroles, the other had a tote of medical kits. They moved without stealth. They moved like women who understand men misread them, and they use it. They saw Rook and didn't startle. They got tired in the eyes. Then the tired turned into steel. "East Clinic line broke," the first said. "We're redirecting to the church basement. The priest owes me 9 favors. I'm cashing 3. "Bless him with a receipt," Dane murmured, too low to interrupt. "You're drawing a flock," the second told Rook, chin toward the lot where men in armor pretended to be metaphors. "Turn your face off. Rook wanted to say he'd lost the switch years ago. He nodded instead. Mari? Sleeping on a bench between two doors, the first said. We made the doors friends. You keep them distracted. Working, Rook said. They ghosted away. Casseroles and gauze cohorts, and Rook felt the world get 1/10 of a degree less impossible. He tamped the blunt, put it out like a secret, and pocketed the last slim heat. What next? Dane asked. The tin eyeing him in his pocket, the question eyeing Rook in his ribs. We make a quiet place and walk through it loud, Rook said. Then we make a loud place and walk through it quiet. They picked quiet first. Under the elevated rail a block east, shade pooled with dignity. The columns made aisles. People who had opted out sat with backs to concrete, sharing blunts, bread, stories built with missing sections. Rook angled them into a gap between two pillars where a cot had become sculpture. A frame with springs, stripped of mattress, hung with knotted plastic bags like prayer flags. He ran the jack handle through the spring grid, once, twice, and then pulled. The metal sang and then went mean. He wrapped the end in cloth and handed the other end to Dane. What am I, a drummer? Dane asked. A gate, Rook said. When stupid charges, we shut. Stupid charged. Not because they were special, because the city is. Two kids with kitchen knives and a king with a telescoping baton too long for his own wrists. Hearts stretched thin, eyes wet with dopamine lies. They saw Rook's face and forgot to think. They came. Rook let them. Dane lifted the springed cot like a portcullis, and the kids hit it like kittens hitting window glass. Knives stuck in springs. Baton got eaten by wire. The king yanked, squealed, decided to retreat like a good general in a cartoon. Ty stepped forward and rapped the king's knuckles with a small piece of chain, a sound, not a wound. The boy yelped, backed, ran, kept his baton because leaving it would have ruined the story he'd tell later. Loud, Dane said, proud of the little opera. Quiet, Rook said, and took them straight into the loudest place nearby. A corner where 3 bars emptied onto one another, and somebody had hung a disco ball from a stop sign like civics class was a joke. A DJ tried to build a temple out of sub-bass. A girl wept on a stool. A man on a crate sold pre-mixed courage in little bottles and hero bands for wrists. The bookie board here had doubt scribbled into the margins. Somebody kept erasing Rook's odds and writing them back worse. Ledger wasn't visible. His wind was. People made space like they knew they were going to move without knowing why. Rook threaded through. Ty put his fist into the back of Rook's coat again because sometimes maps are jackets. Dane slid his bottle onto a shelf and then back into his pocket in a rhythm that said, I steal seconds. Staff from the first bar, the bag bar, pushed through with mop buckets and extra cups, and eyes that had learned less than yesterday and more than they should. One of them saw Rook and flinched. He was only a man until the world made him a show. Rook didn't stop to reassure him. He didn't have that spare. At the curb, a lottery van executed a perfect 3-point turn under a hail of thrown words. Parasites, someone spat. Someone else said, heroes. Rook caught the driver's eyes for a microsecond. They looked like the eyes of someone who had wanted to be a firefighter as a kid and now ate off snacks between tragedies. He stepped off the curb into the avenue because some decisions want traffic to bless them. He let a scooter miss him by half a Bible and a truck miss him by a full one. He felt Dane about to laugh and heard Ty breathe out and in and wanted to bottle that sound and sell it to men who forget to put air in their choices. By the time they reached the next block, the sun had decided it didn't want to be today anymore and was auditioning for tomorrow. The neon came on early. The city exhaled and called it mercy. Bridge? Dane asked again, an ongoing test of an old idea. Not yet, Rook said. We ain't making Ledger's photograph. You will eventually, Ty said, young and ruthless. Yeah, Rook said, but not the one he wants. They tucked into the ribs just before night finished dressing itself. The tarp came out because bodies require ritual. Dane rolled a slow one. keef like sugar on bakery blight. Rook took his half-rail and folded the leaf over it like he was writing a letter he'd never send. Ty ate half an orange he'd saved from the clinic line because he understood about saving. Across the river, the municipal screen blinked into a new graphic, something like a tournament bracket, except uglier. The host's teeth had become a shade of gray that wasn't on the dentist's color wheel. The Chiron promised revised proof guidance, and the word respect appeared enough times to lose meaning. 2 new verified seals thunked into status slots. The city cheered in pockets and cried in kitchens and forgot to do laundry. Rook lay back on cold and counted corners. He made a list of rooms he wouldn't die in: bars with laminated signs, glass yards with altars, tunnels with good acoustics, kitchens with floral curtains. He added bridge decks to the list because Ledger wanted that so bad it smelled like perfume. Dane passed the blunt. Rook took smoke in. He coughed once because lungs are honest. He let himself laugh. Ty looked at him, shocked, then smiled in that cautious way kids do when they discover humor can live during war. "We need 36 hours to stop being famous," Dane said. "Wrong, right, math mixed." "Fame ain't a disease," Rook said. "It's a symptom." He tapped the jack handle next to his thigh like a dog laying its head on your knee. "And symptoms can be managed," the bridge ribs hummed. The river whispered about old ships and older sins. Somewhere above, Ledger planned a sermon he'd deliver with no pulpit and 3 drones. A mother cut crusts off sandwiches and told a kid they were going to grandma's when she meant a shelter, and the kid pretended to believe because politeness can save a life. An angel wrapped a new bandage and failed to explain to herself why the work felt like it had to get done now and forever. Rook let his eyes close for 80 missed seconds. He didn't sleep. He listened to blood, distant and near, his own and the city's. He counted to 10 because Ledger had. Then he counted to 11 because the city always wants one more. When he opened his eyes, the world had refreshed its lies. The gold seals on the screen had multiplied. The comments had turned into soup again. And the bookies had stretched Rook's line until it looked like an insult. He smiled at the insult because it bought him 5 minutes somewhere later. "Tomorrow," Dane said, "we make them trip on a bridge that ain't a bridge." "Tomorrow," Rook said, meaning tonight an hour from now. "We move a picture." Ty tucked the orange peel into his hoodie pocket like an artifact. He looked older again. Not hurt old, plan old. "We got doors," he said quietly. "And none." "Both," Rook said. "Always both." They lay there a breath more, letting the city turn its volume up to drown out shame, then got to their feet with that tiredness that feels like wearing a jacket backward. The million kept on talking. The pavement kept answering. Rook kept count. Night came cruel and dressed immaculate. Fluorescents in bodegas flickered like weak hearts. Drones hummed precise as dentists. The river wore thin frost at the edges, like glass deciding whether to exist. Rook woke from that 80-second blink with the kind of alertness you don't buy. You inherit it when a city tries to erase your name. Dane tamped the last of a keef-studded blunt, flame haloing his thumbnail. Little Ty sat cross-legged on the tarp, hoodie up, palms flat on his knees like he'd learned a new religion, posture and breath. "Inventory," Rook said, voice low. "Chain, bottle, jack," Dane answered. 1.5 in the tin, half a blunt, 2 waters, 1 orange peel, Ty's weird relic. Ty smirked without moving his mouth. "Lucky," he said. "It smells like purple." "Destinations," Rook said. "Avoid the bridge. Avoid the glass yard. Avoid anywhere with a laminated rule about proof." "South Clinic line's done," Dane said. "They're funneling to church basements with casseroles and little gods." "North lots," Ty added. "I seen wristbands for actualized killers. They're forming crews and failing." "We cut east, then south," Rook said. "There's a triangle where sirens echo wrong. Space eats bravery there." They moved. The ribs released them like a mouth that had tasted enough iron for one day. Street level smelled like leaf and pennies. It sounded like men pretending to be drums. Rook kept the river cold on his right ear and a map in his jaw. Dane hung the bottle in his pocket, lip down, the way you keep the mouth ready. Ty stayed almost touching Rook's elbow. His new thing since the apartment stream, proximity as armor, is 3 blocks east, a street preacher with a diamond grill built a sermon out of catastrophe. "They will sell you their mercy," he shouted, "and then take your receipt and tell you never bought it." He had a blunt tucked behind his ear and a small boy holding his pant leg like a pledge. Rook didn't stop. He took the verse and added it to his knife. They cut through a parking lot where a pop-up verification tent had been hammered into the asphalt. Canopy, table, ring light, smiles. 2 women in matching windbreakers manned the station with the patience of mid-level HR. A sign, proof intake, no questions asked. Someone had crossed out NO and written FEW. A man in a Letterman jacket presented a Ziploc bag to the ring light, with hands that trembled in caffeine rhythm. The women made soothing sounds that had the shape of forgiveness and the content of paperwork. "Keep your face off their camera," Dane murmured. Rook did. His DMV glare had been licensed by cowards. He didn't need to donate a fresh angle. Past the tent, a narrow cut between a shuttered pawnshop and a check-cashing joint. It wasn't a place. It was a pause. Rook felt the air cool a degree. Dogs avoid spaces like that. Men think they're shortcuts. That's the joke. He lifted a hand. Dane stilled. Ty did that excellent trick, flat and awake at once. From the far end of the cut, something rolled. Light, fast, precise. Not a bottle, not a bolt. A little canister that hissed like a petty god. Pepper cloud, not orange. White, synthetic, cruel. Rook snatched Ty's hood, yanked him backward, and turned Dane's face into his shoulder. He breathed through his sleeve as the chemical ghost licked brick and learned their names. "Ledger brand," Dane coughed. "Freelancers," Rook said. Ledger wouldn't waste the good stuff on alley science unless he wanted to watch how lungs behave. A shape slid into the cut, careful feet, bad wrists, then another, then 3. Soft armor, hooks, short batons, chest cams blinking red like small sins. Rook didn't step forward. He stepped sideways, slow. He made the alley want to be small for their bodies and kind for his. "Hands," the lead said, polite through a mask. Polite is worse than mean when the glove fits. Rook lifted his hands to waist height and let his chain swing like jewelry. "You want invoice or payment now?" he asked. "Verification," the man said, and his cam drank the syllables. "We'll keep it neat." "You love neat," Dane muttered. "Bet you iron your socks." They came the way they learn in footage. 2 on lines, 1 floater, good geometry, shallow soles. Rook let the lead reach. He slid in, bone to bone, and taught the wrist about obedience. The baton clattered. Dane scooped it with his shoe and made it his. Ty moved on the 3rd line with a trick he'd learned from watching Rook in mirrors. Make small men commit to big mistakes. He faked left and bounced right. The floater tried to correct and hit brick with a grunt of surprise. Pepper Ghost curled around Rook's jaw. He swallowed a cough and punished the leader's elbow against the alley lip in a short kiss of instruction. The arm learned new verbs. The second freelancer came with the hook, and Rook took it on the wrapped forearm, let it drag an inch, then rolled his shoulder so the hook slid past rib and bit brick. He yanked, and the man followed his own tool like a dog on the wrong leash. "Cameras," Ty hissed. Rook heard 2, saw 1, high in the cut, tucked under a rain gutter, indifferent. He pointed. Dane threw the bottle like a lazy saint. The glass kissed the camera lens with justice. Plastic coughed sparks. The alley got less hungry. The lead freelancer tried to talk, as if language could buy him breath. You could go home," Rook said and swept his feet. The man sat hard on old gum and fresh chemicals. His mask shifted. He wheezed truth. A siren bent around the block's corner and turned false. Drone hum took its place. A familiar tone now, personalized irritation. Rook keyed the frequency with his teeth, guessed height, traced angle. Sponsored, not municipal. He didn't have a sky plan that wouldn't cost him a day, so he made himself expensive. He pushed through, body square, caught the floater by his collar, and walked him backward into his friends. They pinballed. Ty darted under knees, chain quick across ankles, not breaking, suggesting. Dane smacked the last helmet with the baton just once, not to crack, so the mask would fog wrong at the wrong time. They slid out the far end before Neat could recompose. The Pepper Ghost tried to chase, but walls stopped gods. Rook wiped his face with his sleeve and let Leaf and adrenaline argue in his blood until they reached a compromise. He didn't smile. He saved those for distances. The avenue beyond had decided to turn itself into a parade. People clung to the edges of the night with both hands. A dancer on roller skates wove through a cluster of Mothers Against Mayhem, while a guy in a foam finger waved at nothing. A food truck sold churros dusted in keef. Legal dessert, the sign crackled. The big screen found a new graphic to hurt people with. A clean animation of a gold seal getting stamped onto a paper labeled Proof, over and over, in perfect mechanical rhythm. The host's teeth had finally dulled to reality. Across the street, a bar nobody loved but everybody used had put a bouncer on its door with a shallow pool of more Pepper Ghosts around his boots. He stopped a line of men carrying coolers and soft-sided bags like fishermen who'd switched ponds. One at a time, he said, and he meant it enough to keep his job until midnight. Rook angled them around that eddy. He wasn't touching anything that looked like procedure. Procedures normalize outrage. Ledger lived on normalized outrage. "Rook!" someone shouted. A different someone, a useful someone. Vocal fry, adrenaline in the throat, the definitely sober sound of a woman who gives good directions. He turned. A head wrap. An angel. Not the casserole pair. A third. Thin, tense, straight line from chin to collarbone. She didn't stop walking. She put an index finger down by her hip and drew a root on the air. 2 blocks down, she said. They set up a choke. Cops looked the other way 'cause Ledger asked with flowers in his voice. "Choke for who?" Rook asked. "You," she said, "and anyone who looks like receipts. They want to process you into content." Dane made a disgusted noise he saved for technical bureaucracy. "We're going south-south," he said, "under the old overpass with the water stain like Africa." "South-south," Rook agreed. "Ty, you lead it. You got the memory for curves." The kid glowed like a statue that had learned pride without arrogance. He slipped into the lane between a shuttered nail salon and a taco spot that had found a way to be always open without ever inviting cops. He charted them down a stair like an apology, through a pallet yard that smelled like cedar and doubt, and into an underpass where pillars wore graffiti rosaries and rats had given up on being shy. The stain looked like Africa, and also like a skull, and also like an island that had learned to float. Rook set them under it because optics matter even when you hate optics. They barely got the tarp down before the night sent a delegate. Not Ledger. Ledger doesn't knock, he annotates. This man wore the city's version of uniform. Clean hoodie, jeans that hadn't had knees yet, soft cap pulled low as if privacy could be purchased at a discount. He held no weapon visible, which is how you know he had 3. "You Rook," he said, and let it be a statement and a dare. "Tonight," Rook said. The man crouched on his heels like his mother had taught him not to sit in dirt. He had a face that used to be handsome and now was pragmatic. "Name's Mason," he said. "I'm nobody." Eyebroker Rook looked at his hands, smooth palms, short nails. The hands of a man who touched money more than metal. "Broker what?" "Roots." He grinned. Quick flicker. "Deals." Pauses. "A way for people who ain't got wings to jump roofs," Dane snorted. "He sells drawing breath." "I sell choices," Mason said, not offended. "Same as your baker with the wrong bell sells forgiveness, and your church ladies sell survival." "Different storefront price?" Rook asked. "Information," Mason said. "Not yours." "Theirs." He tilted his head at the night like the city itself were a customer. Ledger wants you on camera. I want you not to be. My cut's watching a man who might actually endure, instead of 500 boys who will be hashtags by breakfast. What's the choke 2 blocks down? Rook asked. Van and tape and 3 community liaisons with sponsored smiles. They did it earlier on a kid with a skateboard. The comments got horny. They'll do it to you and call it discourse roots, Dane asked, all teeth. Mason sketched the same air map the angel had, but with extra holes. He knew alleys that only existed to people with grandmother eyes. He knew where the sidewalk's joints cracked just enough to trick an ankle. He knew 3 roof ladders that had been painted to disappear and one that squeaked like a rat with opinions. Why you really talking to us? Ty asked, blunt as hunger. Because I bet wrong on a boy last lottery, Mason said. He had heart. He had half your vigilance. He made it 30 hours, and then somebody with a camera and a jawline put him into a bag and a narrative. I didn't like being wrong. He looked at Rook. Also, you walk like a man who will tip. Rook weighed him. Middleman energy, slippery, necessary, doomed to live in what-ifs. He had a certain usefulness and a certain stupidity. Together, they made a coin. You get paid if we live, Rook said. You get nothing if we die. Story of my life, Mason laughed softly. He pointed again. Don't go north. East and tuck under the freeway for a block, then up. You'll cross the choke point on an overhang they forgot to tape. You coming? Dane asked. I got a different appointment, Mason said. New bookie in a laundromat says he can handicap grief. I aim to be insulted until they close. He rose without showing a weapon and left without offering a hand. Rook liked him a little because he hadn't lied about being a parasite. Honest parasites are dependable in a dull way. Run it, Rook said. They sprinted a quiet sprint, bodies low, eyes up, breaths that had learned secrecy. Rook's knee filed a protest. He told it to strike later. Dane's lungs complained. He rolled smoke over them until they made peace. Ty looked like momentum invented him. Under the freeway, the city had stashed bones, tires, mattress springs, a shopping cart that had gone to war. They glided over it, hopped a low cable, hugged a pillar, then took the up and left ramp Mason had promised. Halfway up, they heard the choke point grind into place below. Van doors, tape crack, a crowd's eager gasp. Rook didn't look. His eyes are expensive. He counted steps and prayed to no one. On the overhang they crawled, belly low, hands careful. The tape line below glowed like a sick parade. 3 liaisons smiled and asked for cooperation. 2 chest cams caught cooperating faces. A portable light made everyone's pores confess. Rook watched a kid from 2 blocks ago, roller skates, courage, get trapped in courtesy. He wanted to fall on the scene and ruin its angle. He did not. Survival is sometimes ungenerous. At the far end, they dropped into a service cul-de-sac where dumpsters had been baptisms and fires had taught lessons. A metal door hissed open an inch. The angel, the first one, the casserole's cousin, peeked, scanned, nodded. You're late to die, she said, approving. We like the habit, Dane said. Down, she said, holding the door. Inside, the basement felt like an ark. Old varnish, wet concrete, a room full of tired miracles. 10 women working, 3 braiding hair gentle enough to be prayer, 2 taping wrists, 2 boiling water, 2 counting pills, 1 standing with a bat, and a stare that had ended arguments before they started. A boy slept on a bench with headphones on and no sound playing. Against a wall, 3 plastic tubs of donated sneakers labeled small, smaller, tiny. They took 6 steps in and stopped because the room had its own laws. Rook's chest pulled in something like relief and refused to call it by name. The Batwoman eyed his chain and nodded as if to say, yes, but not in here. The head wrap angel pointed at a folding table. Bread, jam. Bananas ripe enough to bruise at a glance. Rook tore bread, handed half to Ty, half to Dane, kept none, and then kept some when Dane shoved his back with a look that meant reciprocity is hygiene. Ledger trying to make a cathedral on the bridge, the angel said. 3 drones, a cherry picker, 6 microphones, 2 cops, 1 priest. He wants a picture that explains the decade. Fuck his cathedral, Dane said around a mouthful of jam. We'll build him a detour, Rook said. You'll need quiet to pay for it, she said, and passed him a bottle without label. It smelled like rum and mouthwash. He took 2 sips and felt heat separate his ribs from his bad ideas. They didn't stay. Refuge becomes ritual, becomes target. Rook bowed his head to the Bat Woman and the braiders and the woman counting pills. He didn't speak thanks. He looked it. They took the look like currency and turned back to their work. Back outside, the choke had shifted 2 streets south. The van had learned sprawl. A sponsored host tested a mic and found certainty. A stream title bled across the municipal screen. Bridge Vigil 2 Night Rook sighting, with a question mark that looked like a hook. That, make him late, Rook said. Make him bored. Dane grinned. My gift. They took Mason's second route and found themselves where the freeway kissed a long, low warehouse with its windows shot out and replaced with hope. Rook counted ribs and found one he liked. A crossbeam drooping a degree. A chain hoist whose brake had been replaced by duct tape. A catwalk sagging with memory. This was a place where gravity would argue with hubris and win with a grin. He sent Ty up the narrow steel ladder with the caution of a father pretending he wasn't. Dane followed, bottle tucked, chain looped over his shoulder like elective jewelry. Rook climbed last. His knee called him names he deserved. Up top, the city opened like a book and screamed at its own punctuation. Drones made constellations you could hate. The bridge to the west glittered with men wearing importance like capes. The municipal screen pulsed between sincerity and ad space. Somewhere, a band tried to play music without using the drums and failed. Show him a picture, Dane said. Rook tested the hoist's tape, unwrapped 3 turns, tested the brake, found nothing but friction and dare. He looped the chain over the catwalk's lip. Dane took the other end and wrapped it around a support. Ty crawled out to the midpoint, cursed hazard with youth, and hung a half brick from a knot like bait. The drones found them. Of course they did. 2 angled east, red eyes polite and hungry. A third hovered 30 feet up, waiting for a narrative. Rook slid a screwdriver into the hoist's throat and leaned. The chain grinned. The catwalk complained. Ty looked like a sentence about to be diagrammed. On 3, Rook said. 1, 2. The chain let go on 2, and the half-brick swung out like sarcasm. It clipped the drone's belly, and the drone made a sorrowing sound, spiraled, and bit the roof in an expensive kiss. The other 2 pulled back, cautious as smart cowards. The city gasped and cheered and swore and wrote it down. Back, Rook said not loudly. They slid off the catwalk and into shadow before heroes could interpret them. Behind them, a chorus of sponsored voices tried to decide if what had happened was safe, legal, moral, or profitable. Consensus, content. They went ground and threaded east, dodging a passing convoy of community liaisons and a priest with a portable pulpit, who had decided this was the hill he'd turn into an invoice. Rook's knee shook off its grievance and signed the day's contract again. Walk, not fall. The bridge lit itself like a nightclub. Speakers sprouted, a mic line stretched, a camera crane arced. Ledger's silhouette appeared on a rib, casual as weather. He lifted a hand. The city quieted a degree. Don't, Dane said. I'm not, Rook said. He ducked them under the roadway and into the undercarriage. Bolts like stars, shadows like grammar. They crawled, they breathed. They went cold on purpose. Above, Ledger spoke. The content was inevitable. Community, safety, witnessing, responsibility. He said them with enough ballast that men wanting to believe could. He promised nothing and delivered applause. Below, Rook set his palm on the bridge's cold belly and counted. Not minutes, opportunities. He felt each rivet and named it after someone who had run out of breath today. He whispered nothing, and it sounded like prayer. Dane's whisper cut. We made him late. Tomorrow he'll be mean, Ty said. Tomorrow will be wrong, Rook said, on purpose. They slid back to the ribs. The tarp welcomed them like a poor mother who had stopped asking where you'd been. Dane rolled the last blunt with hands that remembered childhood muscle memory. Slow, patient, tight. Rook cut a line thinner than a lie and let it sing under smoke. Ty ate the last of the bread and hid the orange peel where his hoodie would keep the smell for later. On the screen across the water, gold seals thunked like heartbeats you could buy. The host's smile trembled, then calmed, then trembled again. The ticker bragged about partnerships, church, city, corporate, police, words braided into rope they'd try to hang guilt with tomorrow. Somewhere the lottery van took a short route and arrived too early, then parked and waited because death hadn't fit its schedule. Rook set the jack beside his thigh. He touched the tin and heard the chrome cross inside tick against powder, two religions that didn't like sharing altar space. He breathed smoke that smelled like leaf and pennies and the ghost of sugar. He looked at Dane. He looked at Ty. He let a corner of his mouth lift, the only permission he gave the night. The red streets glowed like coals. The city chattered. Ledger wrote notes nobody could read until morning. Angels packed leftovers into plastic tubs and promised themselves they'd sleep next week. The river turned over and over, pretending it could wash any of this off. Rook closed his eyes and held the picture of the bridge in his head. Then he changed the angle 1 degree, and a degree is sometimes all a man needs to live instead of becoming proof.